There we go. There we go. There we go. On with the show. On with the show. The show must go on. Welcome to Noon and Nine with Doc Ock. Noon and Nine with Doc Ock. That's the time when everything will be really fine because we just do a little get together here for a few minutes. We're going to take up about 10 minutes of your time. And then we're going to turn you back over to your regularly scheduled program, whatever that may be. So for today, we want to get right into it because we got a special piece we're bringing you today. This is going to be a series of pieces on out of a particular book. We're going to another book today. Actually, we're going to two different books today. And the first thing we're going to do today is we're going to do our proverb. So our proverb today is, when spider webs unite, they can tie up a lion. When spider webs unite, they can tie up a lion. So think of this as having to do with David and Goliath, right? David had nothing but a slingshot and a rock, but he took Goliath out. You know, little guy could take down the big guy if he comes up with a good plan. All right. So today, as I said, we're starting a new series, and this one is connected with the works of a Nigerian writer by the name of Amos Tutuola. Everybody say Tutuola, Amos Tutuola. And this is two books combined in one. These are the first two books that I ever read of Amos Tutuola's back when I was a teenager. And the first one is The Palm Wine Drinker, and the other one is My Life in the Bush of Ghosts. Yes. And that's the one we're going to read from today because it relates to the story I read yesterday about Kibo and the what was it? Oh, Kibo and the Bush Spirits. I read a story yesterday about Kibo and the Bush Spirits. So this picks up where that story left off. But along with that, I'm also going to introduce another book today. This one we created here at Black Facts, and it's called Winners Play Mancala Games. This one is actually on Amazon. Winners Play Mancala Games. And Winners Play Mancala Games is not a storybook. This is more like an instructional. This is more like an instructional book. So it actually goes into the details of how to play the quote unquote national game of Africa, which is pictured here on the back. These are some of the game boards that we actually own here at Black Facts. And this one up here at the top, that's the first type of game board, the kind of Mancala game board I ever used. And it's called, the game we play with that board is called Amweso from Uganda. But then we've got another one down here that you could use to play Bao, like Bao Tanzania. You could play Bao on it. And then over here we have one from Ghana that you play Owade. And then up here you have one from Nigeria that you play Ayo on. So the game has many different names, but it's played all over the continent of Africa. And in doing my historical research, Africa is the only continent where I've been able to document the game being played in nearly every single country. There's a few countries that got left out, but I've been able to document the game being played in nearly every country in Africa, which is why they call it the quote unquote national game of Africa, even though Africa is many nations, not just one nation. And the reason I'm bringing that book up is because I have a picture I drew in here of Omega Wally, right? Does it have its whole name in it? Yeah, Philip Omega Wally. Philip Omega Wally. And Philip Omega Wally is the man who actually came up with the algorithm that allows us to have the internet, period, dot. He came up with the algorithm. They said it couldn't be done. So he had to do it. But this particular brother, when he was a youth, he was a child warrior in the Biafran War, which is a war that was fought in Nigeria. And that's where the story that we're going to read here starts at. It starts during a time of war. It's kind of like the Bible. You know how the Bible starts off with, it starts off with creation, and then they quickly go into some begats. And right after that, they go into who killed who shot John. So the first, this book is divided into, you could call them chapters, but they're really like stories because they're very short chapters, and each one is more or less could be self-contained. So we're going to read the first one today, if I have time. The meaning of bad and good. I was 7 years old before I understood the meaning of bad and good, because it was at that time I noticed carefully that my father married 3 wives, as they were doing in those days, if it is not common nowadays. My mother was the last married among the rest, and she only bore 2 sons, but the rest bore only daughters. So by that, the 2 wives who had only daughters hated my mother, brother, and myself to excess, as they believed that no doubt my brother and myself would be the rulers of our father's house, and also all his properties after his death. My brother was 11 years old then, and I myself was 7. So it was at this stage I quite understood the meaning of bad because of hatred, and had not yet known the meaning of good. Now we're taking you into the deep, these are the deep stories. These are stories this is the real African folklore, not the filtered stuff that we usually get in those little books for the children. My mother was a petty trader who was going to various markets every day to sell her articles and returning home in the evening. So if the market is very far, she would return next day in the evening, as she was a hard worker. In those days of unknown year, because I was too young to keep the number of the year in my mind till this time, so there were many kinds of African wars. Some of them are as follows: general wars, tribal wars, burglary wars, and the slave wars, which were very common in every town and village, and particularly in famous markets and on main roads of big towns at any time in the day or night. These slave wars were causing deadlock to both old and young of those days, because if one is captured, he or she would be sold into slavery for foreigners, who would carry him or her to unknown destinations to be killed for the buyer's god or to be working for him. But as my mother was a petty trader who was going here and there, so one morning she went to a market which was about 3 miles away from our town. She left 2 slices of cooked yam for us, my brother and myself, as she was usually doing. When it was 12 o'clock p.m., the cocks began to crow continuously. Then my brother and myself entered into our mother's room, in which she kept the 2 sliced or cut yams safely for us, so that it might not be poisoned by the 2 wives who hated us. Then my brother took one of the yams, and I took the other one, and began to eat it at the same time. But as we were eating the yam inside our mother's room, these 2 wives who hated us heard information before us that war was nearly breaking into the town. So both of them and their daughters ran away from the town without informing us or taking us along with themselves. And all of them knew already that our mother was out of town. Even as we were very young to know the meaning of bad and good, both of us were dancing to the noises of the enemy's guns, which were reverberating into the room in which we were eating the yam, as the big trees and many hills with deep holes on them entirely surrounded the town, and they changed the fearful noises of the enemy's guns to a lofty one for us. And we were dancing for these lofty noises of the enemy's guns. But as these enemies were more approaching the town, The lofty noises of their guns became fearful for us because every place was shaking at that moment. So when we could not hear it, then we left our mother's room for the veranda. But we met nobody there, and then we ran from there to the portico of the house. But the town was also empty, except the domestic animals as sheep, pigs, goats, and fowls, and also some of the bush animals as monkeys, wolves, deer, and lions who were driven from the bush that surrounded the town to the town by the fearful noises of the enemy's guns. All these animals were running and crying bitterly up and down in the town in searching for their keepers. Immediately, we saw that there was nobody in the town again. We stepped down from the door to the outside, as all the while we stood at the door looking at every part of the town with fearful and doubtful mind. So first of all, we traveled to the north of the town, as there was a road which led to the town of our grandmother, which was not far away from ours. But as these animals were giving us much trouble, fear, and disturbing us, so at last we left to run to the north and then to the south, where there was a large river. We crossed the road, on which we should travel to some protective place to hide ourselves. But as the enemies were approaching near, we left the river at once. And when we went further on this road, we reached a kind of African fruit tree which stood by the road. Then we stopped under it to find a shelter. But as we were hastily turning round this tree, perhaps we would see a shelter there. 2 ripe fruits fell down on it. Then my brother took both and put them into his pocket and started to carry or lift me along on this road, as I was too young to run as fast as he could. But as he himself was too young to lift or carry such weight like me, so by that he was unable to lift me to a distance of about 10 feet before he would fall down 4 times or more. When he tried all his power for several times and failed, and again at that moment the smell of the gunpowder of the enemy's guns, which were shooting repeatedly, was rushing to our noses by the breeze, and this made us fear more. So my brother lifted me again a very short distance. But when I saw that he was falling several times, then I told him to leave me on the road and run away for his life. Perhaps he might be safe, so that he would be taking care of our mother, as she had no other sons more than both of us. And I told him that if God saves my life too, then we should meet again. But if God does not save my life, we should meet in heaven. But as I was telling him these sorrowful words, both his eyes were shedding tears repeatedly. Of course, I did not shed tears at all on my eyes, as I put hope that no doubt I would be easily captured or killed. And it was that day I believed that if fear is overmuch, a person would not fear for anything again. But as the smoke of the enemy's guns were rushing to our view, then my brother left me on that road with sorrow, and then he stopped and put his hand into his pocket and brought out the fruits which fell down from the tree under which we were about to hide ourselves before. He gave me both fruits instead of one. After that, he started to run as fast as he could along this road towards the enemies unnoticed, and he was still looking at me as he was running away. So after I saw him no more on the road, I put both fruits into my pocket and then got back to that fruit tree under which we picked them. And I stood there only to shelter myself from the sun. But when the enemies were at a distance of about 1/8 of a mile to that place where I stood, I was unable to hear again because of the noises of the enemy's guns. And as I was too young to hear such fearful noises and wait, so I entered into the bush under this fruit tree. This fruit tree was a sign, quote unquote, for me. And it was on that day, I called it the quote unquote future sign. Now it remained me alone in the bush, because no brother, mother, father, or other defender could save me or direct me if and whenever any danger is imminent. But as these enemies had approached us closely before my brother left, because of me, he was captured within 15 minutes that he left me. But he was only captured as a slave and not killed, because I heard his voice when he shouted louder for help. And that is the end of that first section, the meaning of bad and good. The story will pick up tomorrow. We'll pick up the story when he enters, once he gets into the bush of ghosts. Now, this bush of ghosts, remember I explained to you yesterday about the bush of ghosts and how the bush of ghosts is it's the countryside, and it's like a forest, but people don't go in the bush of ghosts. Adults do not go. Only someone that does not know he's not supposed to be there would go into the bush of ghosts. And that's where he's headed to, because he does not know the meaning of bad or good. And so that's how he ends up in that bush. So we'll talk some more tomorrow about this story and about Amos Tutuola. In the meanwhile, we're going to have to sign off because our time is run out even more so. Remember, if you're seeing this on YouTube, go ahead and hit the subscribe button below. If you're seeing this on Facebook, give us a like, give us a share, show everybody that you really do care, and share some real African folk tales with your friends and your family. We're doing this at noon because I don't really think it's so much for the children, although some young people may be able to handle it, but I figured it's better. This one is better for the adults because it's dealing with, there's a lot of different things he's going to go through in this story. This is an odyssey, every bit as engaging as, what's that guy's name? Harry Potter stories, or I don't know, what's that one? Unexplicable things that happen, all that stuff that they be giving y'all out there, you be reading, and they make the movies out of it. This one, no movie. Written 1956, 58, right around in there. So 60 years old, no movie on it yet, and you barely even hear about Amos Tutuola at all. He's one of the most overlooked African writers of all time. I mean, Wole Soyinka, he gets plenty of play, but Amos Tutuola, nobody even hears about him except for Ice-T. He don't want to know about Amos Tutuola. So maybe you should know what Ice-T knows. Meanwhile, peace out, y'all. Have a good day. Get something done and have a little fun. And I see you out there.